Hello and welcome to another episode of Rustacean Station. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today I'm with Alexander Lopatin, who is the creator of Cargo Limit. Welcome, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, great.
Now, we're here to talk about Cargo Limit, right? We did talk a little bit about your past. Why don't you kind of bring us up to speed about what is your background, and then we're going to dig into Cargo Limit. So how did you first get into programming?
Oh, wow. I didn't know. I was in school. I didn't know what actually catches me. And since I moved to another school where we started learning programming, I remember everything else just stopped making any sense. That was something like that. Then we were coding very simple things in Pascal. Then I went to college, studied software development there for years. It was cool. Basically, just boring adult life.
What languages were you learning? You took computer science or software engineering when you were in school?
It's more like software engineering. Yeah, of course, it's software engineering. Yeah.
What languages were they teaching in?
It's mostly very ancient things like Delphi, Pascal things. There was C, of course. Yeah, this wasn't very creative. It wasn't like a program that, I don't know how it's called. Colloquium. Yeah, I wouldn't call it colloquium really, really modern. But yeah, I was learning things by myself. I was learning C++ a lot. Yeah, I was using C++ a lot where I could.
Now, how did you feel about C++? Did you feel powerful? Did you feel maybe a little bit worried because of how dangerous it can be if you don't know what you're doing? Or what was your thoughts while using that?
That's interesting. I think that C++ gave us a lot of good and bad ideas how we can design languages, specifically for highly loaded applications. And yeah, it is dangerous because if you are a single developer that works on a single project, that's still fine. You can write very safe code in this language and have a good time. But as soon as you get more people in your team, it becomes really weird because you actually need a very high expertise in this language in order to really write software that at least doesn't go to undefined behavior all the time. It's like some programs just became like in corporate environment, something like undefined behavior driven development rather than like something normal.
You mean like people using bugs as a feature?
No, it's not like that, but it was so buggy that it was just extremely hard to debug this. And it's just weird to get this into production.
Now, when did Rust come onto your radar? When did you first start to hear about this language? What made you interested in to dig into Rust and to start to use it?
Yeah, it actually was the only language that was something like C++ that allows you to write programs without garbage collector and with very powerful type system that I really intuitively felt that this is going to be possible future for us, specifically for operating systems, web browsers, of course, and maybe things like video editors, just things that are quite complex and just requires a lot of code that would really, really, I don't know how to say it, just use the best that your hardware provides.
I see. So how long were you using Rust before you start to think about creating Cargo?
I don't know. I was using it occasionally since 2016. Currently, I'm actually coding in Rust corporate environment in a travel tech company. Yeah, I think that I started working with these companies, I guess, since 2000. It's for a long time already.
Yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit about Cargo Limit, right? Because the name is a little bit ambiguous on what it means. Sorry, not what it means, but what it is. Can you describe what is Cargo Limit?
Yeah, originally it was a workaround specifically for a problem with a lot of messages that compiler can give a lot of unrelated messages. You can have an error in the application and you can have a bunch of warnings that actually just consequence of this error. And I would like to see at least less messages so I could focus on what matters most. Yeah, there's bug was reported on Rust compiler with possible workarounds that just like simply basically tail or head something from these messages. But I just re-implemented it in Rust and started like finding better ways to deal with messages. At some point, I figured out that originally I was thinking like, okay, I will make this application specifically to deal with separating errors from warnings. And I want to see errors first and just ignore warnings and just to see how it will go. And I was testing it in my pet projects and in corporate environment. And yeah, it's nice. And still, there are cases where you would like to see warnings as with a mix of errors, but it's mostly not like that. And there are just several other issues. One of them is that you can see a message about specific module and some other message about some completely different module, and then again a message about the first module. This is where I started thinking like, okay, what if we group the things and like, well, how it will go? And yeah, it works okay, but there's another problem. In order to do the grouping, you actually need to wait until you get all the messages. And in like middle-size programs, it can be tough. It can be, the building can be very slow. And this is like where it becomes unusable because you might have an error. You definitely need to stop compiling here, but you will never know that because you need to collect all the messages. So I added time limiting here. So just in case if we run into an error, we wait for some time, like a second or something that you can set with environment variable. And yeah, it just stops and brings you whatever it was able to get. So this is how the naming was selected. But currently, yeah, I would call it something different. But yeah, it's just people already know it as cargo limits. Still fine.
I find it interesting that you based this on an issue from 2015 that's still not resolved. It's still open. I looked at the issue from your page about, is it Rust C -- fatal, right?
Yeah, it is still not resolved.
That issue is basically to stop the compiler once it runs into an error, right?
Yeah.
I find it kind of interesting because that's very common, I think. Somewhat common at least. And I know there's another one where it's like stop, or what is it? Treat warnings as errors. I think is maybe a little bit more common. I think Rust already has something like that though, right? Where you cannot compile a program if it has warnings. You can add a flag to it.
Maybe.
So how do you actually manage to parse all the errors and kind of put everything in a way? Because you also order it from like beginning to end or something, right? Because I guess the errors that come in are not actually in order.
Yeah. It's very simple. Like, yeah, I'm just parsing the JSON from there's argument for cargo that brings some argument to compiler that you can parse the JSON. Then you just do whatever you want. I'm sorting things, grouping things. I'm actually not ready to answer because I wrote it quite a long time already. What exactly I'm doing, like,
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't remember how you parse everything, but you're still adding features to cargo limit, I believe. That's how I saw it on Reddit and contacted you, right? So what kinds of features are you adding to it? Because to me, it seems pretty straightforward. It's like, okay, stop compiling once you have an error and show that error immediately. It sounds simple, right? So what other kind of features or bugs are you fixing to keep adding to cargo limit?
Yeah, let's see. It's really, it starts like something very simple, but let's see what I do now. First of all, bugs, just small bugs. I added integration with Neovim because I wanted to make instant jumps to certain lines with errors. And I don't want to use things like Rust Analyzer for that because it's a different thing. I want to like have an instant access to things that were not good during the compiling. So yeah, this is where like very small bugs experience a lot of debugging here. So it's mostly bug fixing.
Yeah, I've seen you have quite a few different. So the way to run cargo limit, it's not cargo limit, right? You basically add L to a bunch of existing commands.
Yeah,
So if you want to build cargo build, you would actually use cargo L build, and that would just probably stop the building process once it ran into the first error, right?
yeah, that's right.
L bench, L check, L clippy, which is interesting. Now, I know clippy, I believe you have to install clippy separately. So does
Yeah,
this mean that if you don't install clippy, then L clippy will not work, or is it like a self-contained binary?
no, it's not self-contained binary. It will not work if it's not installed.
Okay. So you got L clippy, L doc, L fix, L run, L rust, C, L rust doc, and L test. Wow, you even got test in there. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Now you also recommend to use cargo watch with this, right?
yeah, that would make it better because you don't need to rerun it. I have a lot of things that I would like to improve. Specifically, I want to integrate colorized stack traces, which is a completely different thing. But again, what I'm trying to do is like a wrapper of a better compiler output and programs outputs and things like that. And what would be better is just to go to Rust community and say, okay, we would like to have this, this, and that, but that would go into a long discussion like this bug we've seen and prioritization, like bureaucracy stuff. I don't want to have bureaucracy stuff. I want to like check things very quickly, do a few hacks and start using them.
What do you mean by bureaucracy, right? Is there anybody else working on this project besides yourself?
No, I work on cargo limit by myself. I mean, the bureaucracy in like big projects like Rust compiler, if you want to introduce a new feature, you need to go through this RFC process and yeah, it's just, I didn't feel like this for me, like that would take a lot of time.
Okay, so that's why you created like the separate extension you have to install, right?
Yeah, just with hope that the Rust community will see like, oh, it could be like this.
Mm-hmm.
Now I want to move things that worked into compiler.
Yeah, that makes sense. Shit, I am kind of curious, right? Because I do hear about these. I mean, I don't know what you call these. I guess cargo extensions. Is that what these are called? Cargo extensions? This kind of
Yeah,
project?
it's a cargo extension. It's a wrapper. It's a wrapper that runs cargo with certain arguments and do the parsing, all this stuff.
Now, how do you install this, right? I think it's just a simple cargo something and that gets installed like globally. Is that right?
Yeah, it will be installed globally. And you can also install the Neovim plugin just with a normal Neovim plugin system, Vim plug, or whatever you use. So yeah, it's just very easy.
Now, actually, something I'm always kind of curious about is how do you even create this kind of extension or plugin for cargo, right? Where did you find out how to actually do something like this? I mean, is it within the Rust book itself, or how do you figure out how to do something like this?
No, it's. I guess it's not in the Rust book. It wasn't at the moment when I was writing this. I'm actually not sure. I guess I just started with running cargo and see how other wrappers work, and it was very straightforward.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to figure it out, is to see how those things work, right? Which kinds of cargo plugins or extensions were you looking at to help you figure out how to do this one?
I'm not sure I can remember that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. This project is quite old, I believe, because I saw some issues back in 2021 you haven't fixed, or sorry, not haven't fixed, I haven't done yet, like the stack colorization, etc.
Yeah.
So how do you figure out which issues you want to work on next? Is it just based on your own personal need, or is you have quite a few followers who are asking for certain things?
People are asking certain things, but often I do something just before they ask.
You mean you already know what people want, and based on kind of yourself as being one of the users, right?
It just feels like I started this project, like doing these specific things, made people interested in these specific things, and they just seem to be thinking like me about like, oh, I need exactly exactly this behavior. And just as soon as I add something new, they seem to like it just because they thinking the same, maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, since you already know what you want, I guess there must be similar people out there with the same thinking as you, right?
Yeah.
Now, I did see that you also linked to a project called Bacon, right? You think Bacon is similar to Cargo Limit?
I actually never used it, but I guess the reason I put it here is it's not like solving the same problems, but it's just like the only project that I know that parsing. Well, I'm not sure what it does internally, but deals with messages. It deals with the categorization of messages into errors and warnings. So yeah, it's the only project that I know. Mostly like I put it here because of marketing, because people could find it. Like there's backend. Like what could I find else in Google?
Now, I am kind of curious, right? Because it seems a lot of people are using VS Code when they're writing basically everything, especially Rust, because it works pretty well with Rust Analyzer. Now, you chose Neovim as your main driver. Why choose Neovim over any other editor?
Yeah, the reason is because it's just hard to quit Neovim. It's very addicted. It's just, it's hard to switch between various development environments, and just Neovim or Vim, where initially I started with Vim. It allows a lot of customization that I want. And I just cannot have this kind of customization in other things, unfortunately. Or I can have them, but I need to write them, and it would take a lot of time.
Does Neovim also integrate with Rust Analyzer?
Yeah, it is. But it is hard to use Rust Analyzer in large projects or like middle-sized projects, because bugs, it can suddenly stop finding your errors, warnings, things like that are happening. It can be slow. So that's why I use cargo limits to get to the warnings and errors quickly. And I actually use separate temporary directories for Rust Analyzer and everything else, like cargo limit, Clippy, and the things that produce the binaries, because I don't know how it's working right now, but the last time I tried to use it in the same directory, I was running into a lock-in all the time. Like Rust Analyzer just locks the building process all the time. That was a problem for me.
It locks the building process? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, probably because of some workaround that they might cargo check in certain cases. And that's where I cannot run cargo build. I need to wait until the cargo check will finish in the Rust Analyzer in the background somewhere.
I see. Yeah, I think this is a pretty interesting project, right? I'm surprised that we don't have something like this already in the compiler, because it is super helpful, right? You can just, as you're building, you can just run it, see if there's something that stops your app from running, and go straight to it. And your integration with Neovim, it opens up the line automatically, right? And I think that you already have a way that other editors can use similar style, right? As long as they can take in that JSON and react to it. Isn't that what I think I've seen? Because you have like a separate section about how to integrate with other editors, but it's very generic, saying you have to be able to read this JSON.
Yeah, it's possible to integrate with other editors. If you really want, you can use gedit or whatever application that has some API to work with. You can integrate it if you really want.
Now, do you have any more features coming out anytime soon? What's your next kind of couple of things that you really want to work on? Because you do have a couple of features that, you have about 8 issues in Cargo Limit that are waiting to be worked on for feature-wise.
There's a Kanban board here, and there's issues. So first of all, just bug fixing. What about features? I want to integrate colorized stack traces, and I want stack traces that would look something similar to color Eyre. I'm not sure how to spell it. Color EYRE. But specifically, I want to focus on the lines which are about your project. So I want to make. Actually, I had another project that highlights the stack traces. I'm not sure how I called it. Let me find.
You're talking about highlighting the lines in a stack trace that are only in your project, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how that could be useful, because Usually other people's projects are okay. Usually it's some bug in your own code, right?
Yeah, there was a project called Color Cargo. Yeah, so that's what I want to improve. I don't know how, because there's no, with warning scenarios, it was easy because there is an API that allows you can have a JSON that you just need to parse, but there's no such thing for stack traces. For stack traces, you need to replace the handler that basically constructs it. And that means that now we need to patch application somehow. Or you need to put some library in all your crates where you want to have the stack trace, which I don't want to do. I want to have a nice stack trace in whatever program that I run, just whatever I cloned from somewhere. I just want to see a nice stack trace. So that's one thing that I would like to improve. I would like to see readable colorized assertions. There was a project that improves macros like assert EQ and so on. That would be nice to integrate it. It's called pretty assertions. Yeah. Basically, it just shows you a diff of two things that are not equal in some colorized way. So that would be nice.
Yeah. I think colors are huge, right? It's hard to develop in any editor without colors because it helps you to know which parts are keywords and which are variables, etc. Right?
Yeah, and probably that's why Rust community is not very. They're not very much interested in this problem just because it's already solved in things like VS Code somehow. But for those who are using Neovim or something like that, it's still painful to read all those stack traces.
Yeah. I guess if you're not using, I mean, I find that in a similar thing, right? If you're not using VS Code, then yeah, usually people don't care too much about your editor, right? So I think you and I like to use editors that maybe aren't the most popular. I'm a big IntelliJ fan. You like Neovim. I think it's something I want to try someday. Just haven't had a moment to try it out. I do like Vim, so I guess if I like Vim, Neovim should also be good too, right? It's pretty similar to two.
Yeah, it's pretty similar, just new features. And actually, Vim is very much like Neovim. So it's like Neovim became an inspiration for new features in Vim. So they are very, very much similar right now.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I used to be big into Vim before, but I don't know. I feel like when I become older, I'm less into keyboard, more into clicking things, but maybe it's maybe because I'm doing a little bit more management than I am coding some days. So it's just easier to click, click, click than it is to try to keyboard myself around the computer because not everything is in one editor. I'm always switching apps all the time, which you can only shift tab so much or command tab on my Mac for so long.
Yeah, so I just started to think about features that I want to add. Another feature would be like, it's not really a feature. I want to improve this jumping to a certain location of the file because still there's a problem where you can have a warning or error on some line. You can change the code and the line will go down or up, and the next jump would be in the wrong location because the line just moved. Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking about.
Oh, you mean like it could follow the code, right? If it moves up or down, then it'll change the line number.
Yeah. Right now, the jumping feature is implemented like you can run the build and you have a bunch of errors, warnings, whatever, and you just collect all those messages in the Neovim plugin, and you just fix the line, press one button just to save it, and the same button just makes the editor jump to the next line instantly. The next line will with warning or error. And the problem is that if the line goes down or up, then you will jump into the wrong location. The next location will be run in, probably all other locations will be run in the same module.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty useful. Yeah. I don't think I have any other questions or anything to say. Is there something else you want people to know about Cargo Limit or maybe even how to contact you if they're interested to get in touch with you?
I don't have anything in particular. Like if you're really interested in this project, you can install it, try it. and create issues. So you can just find me on GitHub, Lopatin dev. That's how you can find me. The way I want to express like the ideas to Rust community is just creating code, just creating this specific project. There's nothing really to talk about.
Okay. Yeah, and with that, I appreciate you coming on and talking about Cargo Limit. I'm sure other people have the same thoughts as you, and this is the first time I heard about this kind of project, and I can understand that sometimes Cargo spits out a little bit too much information. I think I remarked on last podcast recording that sometimes Cargo says a little bit too much. I mean, it's okay to have too much information, but sometimes you want just something very clean and clear and concise and just limit one thing at a time rather than showing me everything at once. And it could be a little bit overwhelming to go over everything, right? To fix everything at one time.
Yeah.
Cool. And with that, I appreciate you coming on, and thank you for coming and talking about Cargo Limit.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate being part of your podcast.